March 2006 issue of Discover magazine was on unintelligent design. And if you look closely, you'll notice that is an image of Charles Darwin. And it's actually a collage made up of individual pictures of viruses. The reason being, it is in this issue that they are purporting that all life came from viruses. In fact, if you look right here, a little question that says, are viruses the mother of all life? You open up the magazine and the author says, we've been looking for our designer in all the wrong places. It seems that we owe our existence to viruses, the least of the semi-living forms. And about the only thing they have in common with any sort of theological prime mover is their omnipresence and their invisibility. He goes on to say, now there's news for intelligent designers and the rest of us to ponder. We humans, and all life on Earth, may have well evolved from the most unintelligent entities one can imagine. Genetic shards that do nothing but copy themselves. We are nobody's great idea. We are the fortunate mistakes of countless biochemical morons. That's evolution. It's humbling, but somehow comforting. The fortunate mistakes of countless biochemical morons. Yeah, it's interesting. They are trying to purport that we came from viruses. And yet I suspect everybody in this room at some point or another, you probably had a virus. Be a cold or the flu. Now think with me for just a moment. Our bodies recognize those as foreign, do they not? And yet, allegedly, we all came from this common ancestor. You know, one of the very first things we learned in medical school? There's a big difference between viruses and bacteria. Bacteria can live anywhere. Viruses have to have a host. And folks, think about that for just a moment. How could everything have come from viruses if viruses themselves require a host? The reason I share that with you is to show you just how far they are willing to stretch their own imagination to give us some kind of an answer. Because the bottom line is everybody wants to know, what is the origin of mankind? Last night we looked at two different worldviews. We said that there is a biblical worldview and basically a secular worldview. You can sum it up like this. Either we're the fortunate mistake of countless biochemical morons, or we were made in the image and likeness of God. Period. Now you can try to make a hybrid in between there, but the minute that you try to make a hybrid, you just diminished Jehovah God's power. And you just made the viruses mad. That's the bottom line. And folks, listen to me. Only one of those two is being actively taught in the classroom. Daniel Dennett gave a warning to parents that would teach their kids anything other than evolution. Take a look at what he's saying. Those of us who have freedom of speech will feel free to describe your teachings as the spreading of falsehoods, and will attempt to demonstrate this to your children at our earliest opportunity. You at least got to give him credit. He's warning you. And that's exactly what they're doing. Our kids are being told humans probably evolved from bacteria that lived more than 4 billion years ago. Or how about this one? This is a biology book put out by Arms and Camp. Notice what it says. By 7 months, the fetus looks from the outside like a tiny normal baby. But it's not. Folks, why would we say that a 7-month-old in the womb is not a human child? Furthermore, I want you, everybody in this room, I want you to notice something that I call the evil of marketing. Take a look at that picture behind me. Ask any lady in this room that's ever given birth. That's not a 7-month-old. Because by 7 months, they're doing aerobics in the womb. But here's the point. If they can get our children to associate that picture with that statement, it makes it a whole lot easier to abort, doesn't it? Our kids are being told the first animals with backbones to evolve were fish. From these early fish evolved all other vertebrates, including amphibians, reptiles, and even human beings. Folks, make no doubt about it. There is a war going on. It is a war of our very origins. Charles Darwin, the man who is often given credit as being the father of the evolutionary theory, he says there's no fundamental difference between man and the higher mammals in their mental faculties. Well, that's interesting. You know, I've never seen any animal, including the primates, actually take a piece of carbon, insert that carbon in a piece of wood, sit down and actually take another piece of wood, plane it very thin, and begin to write a sonnet or a song or a story. They don't do that, do they? And yet, what do we get bombarded with? Month after month after month. The idea that we evolved from some ape-like creature. Moms and dads, listen to me. Our kids, what I'm showing you right now, they're used to it. It's common. It's in the textbooks. But how real is it? What I want us to do for a few minutes tonight is I want us to compare the idea that yes, we were created with intelligence in the image and likeness of God, or what about the fossil record, these Neanderthal-like creatures? We're going to start by looking at this guy right here. It's a creature they named Ardipithecus ramidus cadava under the bold heading of How Apes Became Human. Now, I want you to imagine how many young people were influenced by that cover. And then ask yourself, how many of those young people actually looked at what the evidence was? Because, folks, that right there is all I got. Let me orient you for just a moment. First thing I want you to notice, especially the young people in this room, take a look. There are 5 individual white boxes inside that frame. The reason there are 5 is because those fossils were found in 5 different locations. So let's take a look. We got some finger bones, a single toe bone. These are actually molars of the teeth. This is the head of a femur. All of these in the middle right here, those are all teeth. These are also teeth. Part of the mandible of the jaw and some long bones of the arm. That's it. That's all they've got. And yet, from that, they get this right here. So we ask the question, we say, all right, where is the actual evidence that you have this missing link? Take a listen to what they say. Hale Celeste and his colleagues haven't collected enough bones yet to reconstruct with great precision what Cadava looked like. But they do know that it was about the size of a modern common chimpanzee, which when standing averaged about 4 feet tall. All right, so we don't have enough bones yet to know what this guy looks like, and yet we're going to put his picture on the cover of Time and in a 2-page spread of the magazine? Yeah? Oh, but that's not the best part. The best part is this. They got a picture of that toe bone with a little caption under it that says, "This toe bone proves the creature walked on 2 legs." Folks, the human foot has 26 bones. They have 1. In fact, let me remind everybody in this room, this is the only bone they have below the head of the femur. This is it. And then I want you to read with me one other admission that they tucked away in this article, buried it, so to speak. Talking about the toe bone, they said not only is it separated in time by several 100,000 years, but it was also found some 10 miles away from the rest of the bones. Guess it just walked away? Can you imagine going out here, you're digging out in the dirt, and your friend calls you from the Detroit airport and says, "Hey, I got a toe bone over here. I think it goes with your collection." You would say, "No, you're nuts." But here's the point. Guys, without that toe bone, they have nothing below the femur. They've got to get it upright and walking. Because otherwise, all you got are the bones of an ape. You go to the zoo and see an ape today. What we're going to do is we're going to walk through what I call evolution's hall of shame. Now, I'll warn you, this is a long hall. It's got a lot of closets in it. It's the hall that our children never see. But I want us to look at some of the candidates in the hall of shame. We're going to start with one of my favorites. Nebraska man. Here you see a picture of what he allegedly looks like. Nebraska man was actually going to be used as evidence in the Scopes monkey trial back in Dayton, Tennessee. In fact, if you look on the screen, this was a picture that appeared in the Illustrated London News in 1922 of Mr. Nebraska man. So we asked that all-important question, the question that I want all of the teens in here to start asking. When they open a textbook, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence that this really is a missing link? Because obviously if we're going to use this in a court trial, if we're going to put this in the newspaper, surely we've got evidence, right? Everything revolves around one tooth. Oh, it looks like 4 on the screen. That's actually the same tooth taken from 4 different vantage points. From that one tooth, we get this guy and his wife. Now, obviously, you got a little bit of license artistically going on here. Here's the funny part. After we had put this creature into the textbooks, and after we had sent it off to museums, we discovered that one tooth belonged to an extinct pig. Or how about this one? Piltdown Man. The next contestant on our Hall of Shame. There you see an artist's depiction of what allegedly Mr. Piltdown Man looked like. But again, we ask that question. We train ourselves to say, where is the evidence for this? Well, this time we've got to go all the way back to 1912, to a gravel pit. A gravel pit in Piltdown, England, where men discovered pieces of a skull and a jawbone. They put them together, and you'll notice this right down here for 40 years, guys. For 40 years, this was touted as the missing link. In fact, there are people in this room whose grandparents studied Piltdown Man in their textbooks. 40 years! We were duped. We've been completely lied to. Because what they actually did was they took a modern human skull. They shattered it. They then took the jawbone of an orangutan. They piled down the back teeth to make it look more human. They dipped the whole thing in acid to age it. And then they presented it to the world and said, here's your missing ancestor. For 40 years, we bought it. How about this one? Orc Man. Again, we asked the question, where's the evidence? Orc Man was found in Spain. One little piece of bone. You see right back here on the back side of the skull, the parieto-occipital region of the skull. Take a look at that lower picture. They made a cast of it, but if you're observant, you'll notice that's pretty small. And that caused them problems because they're trying to figure out how in the world can you have a brain case that's that small? That doesn't fit the evolutionary theory that we got going. Finally, in the 1980s, they came up with a solution. They decided it was a child. That they found a piece of bone from an ancient human child. 1982, they unrolled the banners. They said, we've got the oldest human fossil ever discovered in Europe. They wrote it up in the papers. They put it in the textbooks, only to later discover that one piece of bone belonged to a 6-month-old donkey. That didn't make the papers or the textbooks. How did they do it? How are they convincing our kids? Let me show you. Not that hard. On the screen behind me, you see a picture of what they call Homo erectus, upright walking man. Now, it looks like that is actually what they dug up out of the ground. No, actually, that's about 80 pieces of bone fragments collected from several different locations that have all been glued together. In fact, there's more Elmer's glue right there than there is in a kindergarten classroom. That's not good enough to sell it to anybody. So you know what they do? They ask a scientific illustrator to come in and to make a cast of it. And that's what we sell to museums. That's what you walk by that has those beautiful little placards by it. But again, that's not good enough to sell to our kids. So they invite the scientific illustrator back and say, hey, flesh him out a little bit. Put the lower jaw on, maybe add some muscle, some skin. Lo and behold, guess what? It looks like we went out back and took his picture. But let me remind you, that's over 80 bone fragments collected from several different locations, folks. What about Java Man? Here you see an image of what allegedly Java Man looks like. We ask that question, where's the evidence? This time, we go all the way back to 1890. 1890, they found a fossilized tooth. About a month later, they found this skull cap that you see on the screen. About a year after that, they found a thigh bone. So we got a tooth, a thigh bone, and the skull cap. The tooth and the leg bone were definitely human. But after a lot of analysis, after doing some measuring, they realized, you know what? That skull cap actually belongs to a giant gibbon monkey. Now, just to make sure everybody in here understands how much of a fight we're in the whole creation evolution controversy, the guy who made this discovery, his name was Dr. DeBose. And while he was down there digging, he came across two other skulls. But they were remarkably modern-looking skulls. And he realized the dilemma. You can't have modern man at the same time that you've got Java Man. So you know what he did? He hid them under the floorboards of his house for 26 years. That's integrity for you. How about this one? What about Lucy? How many of you in this room, let me just see a show of hands. How many folks in this room have heard of Lucy? I remember sitting in a classroom setting and literally being told Lucy was what connects us back to the apes. I bet most of you don't know how she got her nickname. Donald Johanson, the guy that made the discovery, they're out in what's called the Afar region of Africa. Now this is back in the days when things were a little bit rougher and tougher. That night they were celebrating in the camp. I mean, they made the biggest discovery of all of paleontology. This is huge. They only had one record. Now, young people, you can ask your moms and dads what vinyl records are later. It was playing over and over and over all night long. And it was a record called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And the name stuck. Now, Lucy was discovered over 25 years ago. Immediately, she made the headlines, she made the textbooks, the banners were unfurled. Here's the interesting thing. We've now had 25 years to actually examine Lucy's fossils. And guess what? She ain't all she's cracked up to be. A couple of years ago, we wrote a book called The Truth About Human Origins. It's 500-page hardback. If you ever have trouble sleeping, it is a great book. It's a really good book. In that book, we spent a great deal of time looking at all of these different alleged missing links. I spent several months of my life doing nothing but doing measurements of Lucy and comparative studies to human anatomy. I want to share just a little bit of it with you. I'm not going to go through every single point on the screen. But let's look at a couple of them. Like, for instance, the first point. Talks about her having curved fingers. You know what? We were originally told that she had hands like us. But she's got hands built for gripping trees. The second point on the screen talks about her having locking wrists. Two guys, Brian Richmond and David Strait, they were in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. They were going to a part of the museum where most people don't ever go. It's where you keep old research papers. They were doing a study when they came across some research papers that talked about primates having the ability to lock their wrists. Because they're quadrupeds, they're walking on fours. They looked at each other and said, hey, I've never seen this information discussed in the human fossil record. They walked literally down the hall to where there was a Lucy replica. Guess what she's got? She's got locking wrists, telling us she wasn't walking uprightly. Maggie Fox said, a chance discovery made by looking at a cast of the bones of Lucy. The most famous fossil of Australopithecus afarensis shows that her wrist is stiff, like a chimpanzee's. Brian Richmond and David Strait, George Washington University reported. This suggests that her ancestors walked on their knuckles. How about the fifth point, or the fourth point on the screen? It talks about a rib cage. Anatomically speaking, everybody in this room has got a barrel-shaped rib cage. Now, some of us in this room got bigger barrels than others, but everybody here, we've all got barrel-shaped rib cages. Chimps have a conical-shaped rib cage. It looks like an ice cream cone. It's going down towards a point. When Lucy was first presented on the scene, they said, hey, she's got a barrel-shaped rib cage. She's on her way to becoming a human. And then they started sending replicas to museums all across the planet. I want you to read with me what one of those museums had to say when they sent their replica. Peter Smith said, when I started to put the skeleton together, I expected it to look human. Everyone had talked about Lucy being very modern, very human. So I was surprised by what I saw. I noticed that the ribs were more round in cross-section, more like what you see in apes. Human ribs are flatter in cross-section. But the shape of the rib cage itself was the biggest surprise of all. The human rib cage is barrel-shaped, and I just couldn't get Lucy's ribs to fit this kind of shape. But I could get them to make conical-shaped rib cage, like what you see in apes. You see, folks, when you really start examining the evidence, what you determine, she was nothing more than an adult male pygmy chimp. You say male? Look at the last point. Talks about her pelvis. Folks, they have tried everything in the world to figure out how can you squeeze an infant through Lucy's pelvis, and it ain't working. Which means one of two things. Either she was the last of her species and they all died out because she couldn't reproduce, or really we should be calling Lucy Lucifer, meaning she's a heathen. Folks, the point is when you actually look at the evidence, she doesn't stand up. How about this one? Kenyanthropus platyops. Big funny looking name. Basically all it means is the flat-faced man of Kenya. This is one of the only pictures that's out there on it. She was discovered by Meave Leakey of the famous Leakey family. We asked that question, where's the evidence? Well, let me allow you to read firsthand exactly what they did discover. An exhaustive study of the article reveals 36 cranial-dental fossils. Stop right there. 36 cranial-dental. That means we've got 36 either bones or teeth. All right? From 4 different locations over a period of 17 years. Stop right there. Folks, if I'm out in the desert for 17 years and my grant depends on me finding something, you think I'm going to glue something together? Yeah. 4 locations, 17 years. Keep reading. Of which only 6 contain bone fragments. So I've got 30 teeth and 6 pieces of bone. Alright, what exactly do we have? Only 2 of the specimens, the skull and the partial upper jaw, are sufficiently intact to be assigned to this new taxon. The authors describe their find as a well-preserved temporal bone, 2 partial maxilla, isolated teeth, and most importantly, a largely complete, although distorted, cranium. Would you say that's distorted? I'd say it looks like a steamroller ran over the top of it, and then we gave it to some kindergartners with that Elmer's glue. I'm supposed to believe that that's a missing link? 4 different locations, 17 years? What about this one? Neanderthal man. Now, I realize there are some wives in this room that think that you are married to. Just because he acts like it doesn't mean he is. Neanderthal man is probably the most popular of all the alleged missing links. On the screen behind me, you see images that have showed up in things like National Geographic. One of the biggest points to make when you look anatomically speaking, you'll notice this prominent brow right here. They thought, surely that's not like other humans. That makes this a different creature. So what do? We put pictures in textbooks telling our kids that we used to be up in trees, and then over time we slowly evolved upright stance, and finally, here we are making our way across the plain. Here's Mr. Neanderthal man. They would say that's modern man, Homo sapien. Here's what those textbooks don't tell our kids, though. 1958, a gentleman by the name of Dr. A.J. Cade examined the original Neanderthalic fossils, and he proved that it was nothing more than a man who had suffered from advanced stages of arthritis. Question, does arthritis change bone structure? Okay, does rickets, osteoporosis change bone structure? Well, here's a question. In this room tonight, we got roughly 150 people. Do we have variation in this room? I mean, as I'm looking out at you, I'm seeing little heads, big heads, fat heads, short heads. Do you realize in this room there's probably at least 2 or 3 of you that would qualify as a Neanderthal? Now, I'll point you out later on. I want you to read a quote from a guy, buddy of mine named Jack Kuzo. He has spent a great deal of time studying the Neanderthal fossils. Take a look at what he said. You must understand that this skull really cries out disease. The teeth are badly decayed. The bones in the vault of the skull are extremely thick. There are many features that testify of acromegalia, or the excessive secretion of growth hormone in adulthood. What are you saying, Jack? You saying that's a missing link? No, I'm saying it's a sick human being. Now, think about that for just a moment. How many times have we dug something up and we don't have the medical history of that person, do we? We don't know if they had arthritis, osteoporosis. We don't know anything other than we found a bone that's a little bit different than the norm. Let's look at one more. What about Flipper Man? 1979, the bone that you see right there in the center is actually the one they discovered. 1979, Libyan desert. They believed it was a collarbone of a very early human. They dated the plankton around it at 5 million years. And I love how they come up with round numbers like that. Why would they say that? Because the goal in human origins is to always be the oldest. That's where the money is. 5 million year old. They then make the assumption that if the plankton is that old, certainly the bone is that old, right? They march it into a science conference, and they make the announcements, we got one of the oldest human fossils. A guy in the audience named Tim White, he says, fellas, you got a little problem. That's not a collarbone, that's a rib bone. And they do it all good scientists. Oh, okay, well, then we got a 5 million year old rib bone in. He said, no, that's not the rib bone of a human, that's the rib bone of a dolphin. Folks, what does the fossil record really show? What is it that our kids are not getting in their textbooks? Absolutely the truth. I'm going to let a guy by the name of Jeremy Rifkin tell you, because I think he summed it up beautifully. Take a look. He said, what the record shows is nearly a century of fudging and finagling by scientists, attempting to force various fossil morsels and fragments to conform with Darwin's notions, all to no avail. He said today the millions of fossils stand as very visible, ever-present reminders of the paltriness of the arguments and the overall shabbiness of the theory that marches under the banner of evolution. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Take a look. God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness. I want you to notice 3 words in that one verse. Us, our. Are those singular or plural? Those are plural. What's the implication? The implication is before God created man, there was a conference of what you and I call the Godhead. Let us our image according to our likeness. Okay, now we've got to ask the next question. What part of me is made like God? I mean, does he have my beautiful profile? See, I can say that. My wife's not here. Or maybe it's my ears or my hands. Last night we talked about the fact that God is a spirit. Those who worship him must worship him in spirit. Okay, if God is a spirit, then what part of me was created in his image and likeness? Folks, do you realize that mankind has a soul? Here's the part we all got to think about. That soul is going to go on. Where is it going to reside? And you say, but wait a second, Brad, time out. Hold on. Before you go preaching at us, I got a problem with what you're saying, because how in the world can you say that realistically we didn't evolve? Because you think about it, we got all these different colors of people. I mean, surely that proves evolution, doesn't it? I mean, think about it for just a moment. We couldn't have all come from just two people. Right? Again, look in your Bible, Genesis chapter 3, verse 20. Adam called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. Telling us all the lineage of humanity is coming through who? Coming through Eve. So how do we explain this one? You say, Brad, surely that's, Adam and Eve, it's just a nice myth or a story. Friends, let me share with you something that our kids are getting, but nobody's talking about. And that is the fact that realistically, our kids are being taught racism. Now, I'm going to tell you about the origin of racism in just a moment. And I want everybody in here to understand a couple of things before I get going. Number one, while I'm going to be using society's definition of race, and that is skin color, there's only one race. That's the human race. But have you ever thought about the fact that in those textbooks that I was showing you, they say that all men came out of what continent? The young people can answer this one. It's Africa. So we allegedly evolved up out of Africa. What do we look like early on? Well, usually we have a lot of hair and we're dark skinned. And we got all these names. You can call us Homo habilis, you can call us Australopithecus. So we're dark skinned, got lots of hair, and then allegedly after several 100,000 years, guess what comes walking out of Europe? White man. Now folks, I don't care how you look at it, that is teaching that white people are further evolved. That is racism. That is teaching a superior race. And here's what's crazy. Textbooks, the ACLU is forcing us to teach it. And nobody gets it. You say, but surely, Brad, that's not, what you're saying sounds good, Adam and Eve, and we talked last night that it's not Adam and Steve. But surely that's not real. Let's take a look. Skin color is caused by a biological pigment known as melanin. Everybody in this room has got melanocyte cells, and in those cells you have a specific amount of melanin that gives your skin its color. The amount of melanin you have is a direct result of your mom and your dad. Now, geneticists have come along and they've said what we're going to do is we're going to use letters to determine how much melanin somebody's got in their skin. So let's say that somebody's really, really dark skinned. We're going to use capital letters, capital A, capital A, capital B, capital B, to designate that person as having lots of melanin. Likewise, we'll use lowercase letters for somebody that is very fair-skinned. What would we call somebody that has absolutely no melanin at all? Albino. And if you've ever seen anybody that's actually a true albino, you look at them and they have that pinkish hue coming. It's not really a pinkish hue. They're actually translucent. You're looking through their skin at their capillaries. because they don't have melanin. But let's think for a moment. Can we take two people? We'll call them Adam and Eve and see if we could come up with all the colors around it. Like, for instance, what if Adam and Eve were both very, very dark skinned? So we do a cross, as we say in genetics. Big A, big A, big B, big B. What would all their kids be? Big A, big A, big B, big B, right? All their kids would be really, really dark skinned. Is that what we see around us today? Nope. So it's pretty easy for me to stand up in front of you and tell you Adam and Eve weren't really dark-skinned people. And you get that look like, oh no, did he just say that? He can't say that. We're living in a politically correct environment. He's going to offend somebody. It's okay, because I'm going to offend all of you. So just wait your turn. How about this one? We're Adam and Eve fair-skinned. Little A, little A, little B, little B. What would all their kids be? Fair-skinned. Is that what we see around us today? Nope. So even though every summer we get the little vacation Bible school package that has the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Eve, hate to be the one to tell you, folks, that ain't right. In fact, we know 55% of the world's population is Caucasian, 37% is Mongoloid, 8% is Negroid. All right? Maybe God used one dark skin and one light skin. Maybe that's how we could get it. On the screen behind me, you see what geneticists call a Punnett square. It's basically what we use to predict offspring. Now let me show you how we read it. Look at the top. We're going to say these genes right across here, that's Adam. He was dark skinned. Down the left-hand side, we'll say this is Eve. She was light skinned. And what you get by mixing those two in each one of these boxes is the potential for their offspring. And in this case, every single one of them is right down the middle tan. Is that what we get today? Somebody says, you're running out of options. You're right, but I do have one left. What if God used a mixture? In science, we call this heterozygous. And by that I mean, what if he had taken two people who basically were a beautiful mocha color? They've got a mixture of genes. What can you get from two people with those genes? There's your answer. Going from one very fair skin, 4 tan, 6 middle of the road tan, 4 darker brown, 1 very dark skin, for a total of 16, and 1 very tired mother. Now, I can get you that with 2 people. How many people walked off the boat? 8. Folks, if you're willing to give me 8 people, and you mix in the fact that today we can get in a plane, a train, a car, and within just a few short hours be in different cultures, people are marrying between cultures, you'd start seeing how we have a rainbow of colors around us today. You say, wait a second, Brad, that's not even possible. Oh, okay. Well, then maybe somebody can explain to me what her secret is. Her secret? Oh, her secret is she has a black twin. Or maybe somebody could explain to me the fact that we have, on many occasions, people who have mixtures of genes who are giving birth to children that don't appear like they would be their own. Absolutely, it's possible. And you say, wait a second, time out, Brad. Hold on. No, I'm not buying it. Because that doesn't explain why we have a predominance of dark-skinned people around the equator and light-skinned people in Europe. That's evolution. No, actually, again, that kind of goes back to the whole racism thing. But is there a biblical or a scientific reason that we can look at? Absolutely. Let's go back to Genesis 11. You remember right after the flood? We are now a couple of 100 years post-flood. How big can a population get in a couple of 100 years? Let's see, we declared our independence in 1776. Have we grown a little bit since then? Yeah. Okay, so we've grown. They've grown. God says spread out. They say, no, we think we want to be like you. So they build a tower. God spreads them out. Now, does he spread them out based on skin color or language? Okay, so let's do a little exercise here. Let's assume that we're at the bottom of this tower. We got 1,000 people, all different colors, and they all speak Swahili. They locate each other through their new native tongue. They all migrate down towards the equator. Who fares better in that environment closer to the sun? The dark skin or the light skin? Dark skin, and here's why. The melanin that makes their skin dark, it actually protects them from the sun's harmful UV rays. The more melanin you got, the more protection you've got. So does it make sense that after a few generations, those who have been very fair-skinned would die off from skin cancers and such? Yeah, they're at a disadvantage. All right, let's flip it. Let's say we got 1,000 people. They're all at the base of the tower. They're all speaking, say, Swedish. All different colors. They all migrate up towards Sweden. Can we figure out a reason why, after a few short generations, they would be predominantly fair-skinned? Sure, absolutely. We know that those areas don't get a whole lot of sunlight. And we actually need sunlight. We use it to make what? Vitamin D. Vitamin D. You know what vitamin D is useful for? Helps your body to be able to absorb calcium. Now, we're going to come back to that in just a moment. But check this out. So we're in an area that doesn't get a whole lot of sunlight. You know that melanin that makes your skin dark? If you're up in that area and you got a whole lot of melanin, you're not going to be able to absorb what little sunlight is available. You're at a disadvantage. So it's going to be in those areas that the people with fair skin are actually going to thrive better. So does it make sense after a few short generations, you're going to have a predominance of fair-skinned people? Yeah. Because the darker-skinned people, they're going to get bone disorders like rickets. They're not going to be able to absorb as much calcium. In fact, where's the only place on the planet where this rule is violated? Where's there a place where you've got dark-skinned people that don't get a whole lot of sunlight? What about the Eskimos? Where do they get their vitamin D? From the fish, the oil. Now, here's another little interesting tidbit for us to chew on. Take a look. Right in here is Neander Valley, Germany. Remember Neander Valley, Germany, that's where they found Neanderthal that had some bone disorders. Would we expect people in this area that don't get as much sunlight to actually have some bone disorders? Wow, isn't that amazing how the two actually go together? Somebody's going to have arthritis or rickets in an area that doesn't get a whole lot of sunlight. See the problem? Folks, listen to me. Evolution has become a religion for people. And they are willing to bend their observations to fit their belief system. It really irks me. We hear this concept of separation of church and state. Number one, that's not in the Constitution. Number two, could somebody please tell me why it is that atheism and evolution, which are both belief systems, which have been called belief systems and religions by the court, why do they get a free pass in the classroom? Because, folks, right now that's the only thing going in textbooks. Our kids are getting this idea that evolution is a fact, not a theory. In fact, let me show you guys something real quick. Let me throw up a slide that I showed the young folks just a minute ago. Let's see. Take me just a second to pull it up. Right. Well, I got 15 windows open and I'm trying to find the one that talked about the let's see, how about just new textbooks? There we go. So I showed this to the young people. This is just a regular biology page. It's teaching evolution. They don't give any backing. Let me go 2 in front of this. Right. It didn't say it. I got one that I'll show you in a minute. It talks about evolution as a fact, not a theory. The textbook goes on to say, birds arose from non-birds just like humans arose from non-humans. Well, that was back in the year 2000. That textbook was put out. Evolutionists got their hands slapped for doing that. Because can you honestly say evolution is a fact? No. It's never been proven. So in the year 2007, we come up with a different strategy. Take a look. This is a current textbook still actually being used. I'm going to read this section, then I'll blow it up for you, but I want you to listen very carefully. Scientific discoveries may be broadly categorized into 4 groups: facts, hypotheses, laws, and theories in order of increasing importance. Oh, so you're not going to let us call it a fact? That's fine. We're just going to change the status of a theory. And they do. And sadly, some of our kids are drinking the Kool-Aid. You say, okay, Brad, all this sounds good, but how in the world, how do we deal with things like the Ice Age and the dinosaurs? How does all that fit in with the Bible? Well, to find out, you're going to have to come back in 10 minutes. We're going to take a short break. We'll get started right back at 7 o'clock. Thank you.